To show my appreciation for hitting 10k subs, I present to you my ridiculously long analysis on Sosuke Aizen. If you love these character analysis videos and want to see more long-form content on Bleach or other anime, then help me out by subscribing and turning on the bell notification. Each subscriber milestone we hit, I want to celebrate it with a long-form video like this one. At what point did you think that I wasn't going to do a video on Sosuke Aizen? Every video I have uploaded has all been for this one upload. Everything went all according to keikaku. Keikaku is a Japanese word which means plan. Okay, jokes aside, Sosuke Aizen is one of the most infamous villains throughout all of anime. Not only is he loved by many, but he is also ridiculed for his memeable phrases and apparent arseballs throughout the series. This video was a very daunting proposition and frankly a video I was reluctant to make, but as a thank you to all of you for getting me to 10,000 subscribers, I owe this one to all of you for your support. I want to really break down and analyze Aizen and see his character for what he is, and not just some memes and funny one-liners. Betrayal, deceit, and dreams of becoming a god. Sosuke Aizen is a very nuanced character, and one that really pushed me to my limits of analysis. Before we can delve deep into his character, let's draw some attention towards how he is introduced to us and what we begin to perceive about him. Aizen makes his debut appearance in chapter 79 of the manga and in episode 23 of the anime. We understand that he is a very well-mannered, intelligent, and soft-spoken individual. He used to be a well-respected member of the Gotai 13, holding the honorable position of a captain. Prior to his defection, he is incredibly kind and compassionate, having many of his underlings admire him, including his former lieutenant Momo Hinamori. However, lying beneath this facade is an incredibly manipulative and cunning mastermind. He is someone who appears to care so much for his underlings, but in actual fact he couldn't care less about them. Whether if this is his subordinates within the Soul Society or the Urankars in his army, he regards everyone around him to be either disposable or a small pawn in his carefully constructed plan to fulfill his ambitions. For the sake of these ambitions, he does not think twice before manipulating a loved one, or even killing others, as long as it progresses his plans forward. What exactly did Aizen desire which led him to construct a plan of events which spanned over 100 years? This century-long plan was made to fulfill his ultimate desire to dethrone the Soul King. After learning the truth about the current system of reality, he adamantly disagreed with it, refusing to blindly serve the Soul King and growing to hate the Soul Society for reinforcing and protecting the system set in place to protect the Soul King. His plan leads him to defect from the Soul Society so that he may stand at the top of the world himself as its rightful ruler. His own hubris and feelings of superiority drive his ambition, as he refuses to accept a world with a vacant king who acts without power to rule. The Soul King exists to mainly maintain the order of reality. He is an absent ruler, and it's this that disgusts Aizen, who deems himself to be far too intellectually superior to be ruled by such a pitiful excuse of a king. This is backed up in chapter 421 when he is being sealed by Urahara. He yells that he despises him, telling him with a mind as brilliant as his, why does he accept the Soul King and the nature of reality? He asks how he can keep obeying that thing. Urahara tells him that without the Soul King, the Soul Society would become divided. It is the Soul King who binds them together. Urahara accepts the way that the world is, but Aizen is enraged by this mentality. He tells him that his logic is that of a loser's. Aizen's last words before he is sealed by Urahara reveal a lot about his mentality. He is so frustrated, and for once overcome with emotion, he blurts out the logic that underpinned his entire plan. He states that a victor does not ask how the world is, but rather how it should be. This one quote should be enough to understand Aizen's obsession with changing the status quo. In his first appearance, we see Aizen speaking with Renji. He begins his manipulation very early on. If we analyze this first appearance retrospectively, we can see that he is planting seeds of doubt into Renji's mind about the circumstances of Rukia's execution. He discreetly asks for his opinion if he thinks that Rukia deserves to die, detailing how the punishment is excessive for the crime that was committed, the time until the execution being shortened from 35 to 25 days, and lastly the use of the Sokyoku to execute her, as typically it is reserved for captain-ranked Soul Reapers. Aizen, who already knows who is behind all of this, begins to make Renji doubt what is happening. He reveals that he thinks someone else is behind all of this. Renji is surprised to learn of a possible conspiracy. This subtle manipulation is enough for him to question the events and eventually begin to conspire against the execution of Rukia after he is defeated by Ichigo. Aizen manipulated the entire Soul Society and even us the reader into trusting him and feeling sorry for him after we are led to believe that he was killed. All of this effort, all for the purpose of changing the status quo through acquiring the Hokyoku. After this brief look at his psychology and motives for his actions, I now want to delve into the subtleties of his behaviors, pulling back his deceptive mask that he puts on so that we can reveal the truth behind his lies. It is all about motive, and there is plenty of motive when it comes to Aizen. To understand Aizen, we need to see how he behaved and the consequences of his actions during the different points of the story. I'll be focusing on 3 key moments within the story. Firstly, before his betrayal, secondly, after his betrayal, and lastly, how he acts after his defeat. Naturally, we begin the story prior to Aizen announcing his betrayal to everyone. From his appearance to his actions, everything about him during the Soul Society arc is so unassuming. I don't know about anyone else, but I grew to develop a respect for Aizen, especially after seeing his caring nature that he shows towards his Lieutenant Momo. Her respect and faith in her captain is incredibly infectious, leading you to suspect nothing. When we discover that he has died, he fools everyone, including us. His manipulations extend beyond the pages of the manga. I remember the shock that I felt when I learned that Aizen had been killed, and especially in the manner that he was murdered, seeing him pinned against a wall with blood running down it, a brutal murder on display for everyone to see. How could someone so calm and well respected deserve to be killed in such a dishonorable way? These are the types of questions I remember asking myself prior to his betrayal. I stated earlier how Aizen began his manipulations with Renji. His deceitful lies lead everyone to believe in a conspiracy which causes factions to form within the Soul Society, who are either in favor of or opposed to the execution of Rukia. The key component of Aizen executing his plan to acquire the Hokyoku was the removal of the Central 46. In chapter 168, we learned that the Central 46 have all been murdered. They represent the highest court in the Soul Society. The decisions that they make are absolute. It is apparent that they were killed a long time ago, and the orders that the Soul Society were receiving were false and from another party, which of course is Aizen. He orders for the date of Rukia's execution to be moved up and deliberately plans for her to be killed by the Sokyoku, so that her body may be destroyed while the Hokyoku within her remains intact. He also deceived everyone into believing he was killed, making it appear as though it was Gin who killed him. He even manipulates his Lieutenant Momo to believe that he was killed by Hitsugaya, who she has known since her childhood. Momo is incredibly loyal to Aizen. That is because he says it himself in chapter 173. He trained her so that she could not live without him. In chapter 169, Momo meets Aizen after his supposed death. She is relieved beyond belief to know that he hasn't died. We see how he speaks to her softly, places his hand on her head, like a paternal figure. These subtle behaviors deeply affect Momo. She is too caught up with his deceit to even question why he faked his death. She is just happy to know that he is alive. He apologizes for making her worry and thanks her for all the time that they spent together. He literally butters her up and lowers her defenses, makes her feel comfort and happiness before we experience his treachery for the first time. He bids her farewell by impaling her through the chest with his zanbakudo. He just looks at her lifeless body with no remorse, a psychotic act which demonstrates his lack of conscience. It is the way that he casually charms his victims with his lies, lures them in and uses them for whatever purpose he requires before discarding them like trash. There is no empathy or moral qualm with the extent that he has to go to fulfill his ambition. Witnessing this treachery after mourning for his death reveals how terrifying it is to be manipulated into believing a certain truth when it couldn't be further from the truth. He takes advantage of people's ability to trust blindly, believing without questioning, and their tendency to live by the status quo, not willing to leave their carefully constructed comfort zones. For Momo, it would be too much to expect her to doubt her captain, despite him always having been this way. When he reveals himself to be a traitor, he states that he had always been like this. There is no change of personality or motives. Nobody realized his true nature, and he took advantage of that, like the opportunist that he is. He orchestrated all of this just so he could acquire the Hokyoku, which is sealed within Rukia's body, all for his ambition, which is revealed to us in chapter 178. As Aizen is ascending, Ukitake asks him why. Aizen reveals he did all of this in the pursuit of greater heights, but Ukitake asks him if he has allowed himself to fall so low from his respected position. Aizen tells him not to kid himself, as he leaves while revealing his true ambition, stating that nobody has ever stood atop of the heavens before, not even the gods. This vacant spot is now reserved for him, as he declares the vacancy to now end. From now on, he himself will stand at the top as the ruler. This is the point where his betrayal is known, and his carefully constructed plan is executed. However, what occurred during the century-long build-up leading up to this point? We learn more about Aizen's schemes and experiments via 2 flashbacks. The first is the Turn Back the Pendulum Arc, and the second is Everything But the Rain. We need to explore the purpose of each of these events in relation to Aizen's ambition, and how they are a part of his carefully constructed plan to overthrow the Soul King. The Turn Back the Pendulum Arc occurs 100 years before the present day. The truth behind the mask of the Vizards is revealed during this arc, as well as the holification experiments that Aizen had been conducting. During this flashback, Aizen was the lieutenant of Squad 5 under the care of Captain Shinji Hirako. Aizen had been studying to create a Hokyoku of his own, a device that blurs the boundaries between a Hollow and a Shinigami. The Hokyoku allows the individuals of one race to attain the powers of the other. It also has the ability to sense the desires of those around it and brings to reality what their heart wishes for. Despite Aizen presenting the souls of hundreds of Shinigami to it, his Hokyoku was still incomplete. He had learned that the Hokyoku that Urahara had created was also incomplete. After learning this, he desired to steal Urahara's Hokyoku and fuse it with his own. This ties in with the Turn Back the Pendulum arc because 101 years ago, Aizen conducted a twisted experiment, which is known as the Holification Incident. Through testing out the true limits of his Hokyoku, he forced Shinji and several other captains and lieutenants to undergo holification. Aizen framed Urahara into being accused of conducting the experiments on his friends and peers. This accusation forces him to flee to the human world along with the Shinigami who had been experimented upon. The Shinigami eventually gained control of their holo powers and formed a group called the Vizards, and hold a bitter grudge against Aizen for what he did to them. The Turn Back the Pendulum arc is the earliest chronological version of Aizen that we see. At this point, he is already conspiring against the Soul Society, conducting experiments and furthering his ambition. We don't really get to see when he had the eureka moment of realizing the truth behind reality, and thus going against the Soul King and everything that he stands for. But it doesn't matter, as his motive is strong and backed up by the flashbacks we see and his consistent actions throughout the series, which serve to forward his ambition. The Pendulum Arc introduces us to the concept of the Hokyoku, as well as explaining why Urahara created his own Hokyoku, as he desired to find a way to strengthen Shinigami through using holo powers. We then see how Aizen uses his Hokyoku through the everlasting trauma that Aizen inflicts onto his peers and comrades. Before the Soul Society arc, he had already ruined and sacrificed the lives of multiple people in pursuit of his selfish desires. We once again see the devastation that Aizen leaves behind in his wake, causing Urahara to lose everything and be exiled, and the Vizards who ended up being involuntary subjects to his inhumane experiment. This results in them being treated no different to Hollows, and were ordered to be killed by the head captain. Urahara was forced to pick up the pieces left by Aizen. Having lost everything, he desired to destroy the Hokyoku that he had created, but it was not possible to do so. He deactivated it and placed it into the soul of Rukia. He gave her a Gigai, which would convert her soul into a normal human forever. His plan was for the Hokyoku to lay dormant within her. However, he did not know that it was Aizen who deployed Rukia to oversee Karakura Town and deliberately led to the events which caused Urahara to place the Hokyoku within her. Not only this, Aizen also had a deliberate hand to play in orchestrating Ichigo's development, after he had learnt about the special circumstances of his birth. Once Ichigo became a Shinigami, he caused several events to occur which put Ichigo's powers to the test. We see this revealed to Ichigo in chapter 397. We learn that he deliberately hastened his development. He does so by sending the Hollow Fisher D to attack his family, or causing Orihime's brother to become a Hollow, making a Menos Grande appear after Uryu had used the Hollow Bait, and also being behind the capture and execution of Rukia. And finally, along with setting up all of the encounters that Ichigo had with his opponents throughout the series, he literally treated the protagonist of the story as his own little research experiment. Fans of the series really reacted unfavorably to this revelation, that all of the events that we experienced within the story had played out in the palm of Aizen's hands. It is difficult to just accept this out of the blue, but once we had the events of everything but the rain occur, this is explained well, and we really get to understand what Aizen meant by describing Ichigo as being the best subject for his research. When he reveals this to him, it causes Ichigo to ask him at what moment he was convinced that he was a perfect test subject. Aizen replies from the very beginning. The moment that he was born, he knew that Ichigo was special, because he was born a human and the answer to this interrupted sentence is given to us in Everything But the Rain. Another flashback where Aizen once again ruins the lives of unassuming individuals to forward his own selfish ambition. Sometime after the Holification incident, Aizen becomes the captain of Squad 5. During this time, Ichigo's father Isshin is also a captain who is leading the 10th Division. Aizen is still conducting experiments which involve hollows. He is also trying to locate where the Vizards have been hiding. Aizen creates a hollow called White, while Isshin investigates a city called Naruki, where the station Shinigami there had died in an accident, along with recent reports of 2 further casualties in the area. At the time, Isshin left alone to find the cause of the deaths. Hitsugaya and Rangiku, who are his underlings, are aware that he went alone to investigate, as he did not want to get them involved, because the possible threats seemed to be above their current level of strength. Aizen has been working closely with Tozin and Gin, who at this point are captains as well. They continue their twisted holification research while also tracking down Shinji and his group. They have equipped hollows with the ability to holify their targets, but the souls of ordinary people and even the souls of Shinigami seem to be unable to handle the holification process. Isshin lures out Aizen's hollow creation, White. He does so by elevating his own spiritual pressure. He knows that the hollow is black and has an incredibly sinister mask, along with a deathly shriek before he charges at the captain, as it locks in on its next target. Aizen and the others watch Isshin battle their creation from a distance, realizing this could really negatively affect their plans. Aizen feels like it is a great opportunity to get closer to the action and witness it firsthand. Using Reiatsu concealing cloaks, they sneak behind Isshin. Just as he activates his Shikai to get rid of White, Aizen attacks him from behind. It appears that there is no shortage of people that Aizen won't backstab in order to progress with his plan. He smirks after he thanks Urahara for providing him with the inspiration to create the Reiatsu concealing cloak, after he used a similar cloak to try and surprise attack Aizen at the end of the Pendulum Arc. Tozen reveals that White was one of the many hollows that Aizen had created, but the difference with this hollow which made it special is that it was created from the soul of a Shinigami. They leave Isshin to battle White, confident that in his current state he won't be able to activate his Bankai, and deem White to be another failed prototype, not caring if it is destroyed by the captain. Before Aizen can leave, he sees Masaki join the battle as she arrives to protect Isshin. Tozen states that he will kill her, but Aizen, being the cunningly perceptive type, wishes to see what will happen now that a Quincy has joined the battle. It is safe to assume he wants to see what will happen if White locks onto Masaki as its target and attempts to holofy her. A Quincy being holofied is indeed a rare sight not to be missed. Sure enough, Masaki allows White to charge at her and bite her, while she fires at point blank range a Quincy arrow right through its head, killing the hollow White. Aizen is very surprised by this turn of events, as before White died, it self-destructed. Once Aizen, Tozen and Gin leave, we learn through Tozen's rant that White was successful in holofying its target Masaki, as it advanced from the target holification phase to the final metastasize phase. What is surprising is that it advanced to the next stage on a Quincy. Tozen deems this experiment to be a failure. The plan had been for White to holofy a Shinigami, not a Quincy, but Aizen, being optimistic, states that White indeed strayed away from their initial goal, but it ended up exceeding their expectations. An unexpected situation occurs. This is the holification of a Quincy. This is a situation that they did not predict would occur. This excites Aizen, as White was created from a dead Shinigami. It then chose a Quincy as its target for holification. Aizen is intrigued to monitor what happens next. This explains why Aizen had been closely watching Isshin and Masaki and knew about Ichigo from the moment that he was born. From the very beginning, he knew the significance of his birth, being the firstborn to a Shinigami and a Quincy who had an attempted holification. This explains why Aizen planned for certain circumstances to occur in Ichigo's life, along with testing him through making him battle several different opponents, chosen especially by Aizen in order to develop Ichigo's strength. He stationed Rukia in Karakura town and was behind Fishbone D attacking his family. This chain of events led to Ichigo becoming a substitute Shinigami, and from here on out, he was just another piece of Aizen's plan. He monitored Ichigo closely to understand how a Shinigami's powers can be amplified by hollow powers. He does this alongside orchestrating Rukia's execution, which would let him acquire Urahara's Hokyoku. We learn eventually that the hollow White was transferred to Ichigo. Aizen is impressed by Ichigo's growth during the battle with Byakuya. This is why he asks Ukiura to assess if Ichigo continues to develop at his current pace, would he become an obstacle to his plans further down the line. I feel now that we have an understanding of Aizen's past and his history with the protagonist explained, we can now better understand why he behaves the way that he does after his betrayal. Let's now look into what leads up to Aizen being defeated by Ichigo, also commenting on his ambition to become a god in an attempt to ascend to new heights, how this ironically leads to him being banished to the deepest depths of prison, far removed from the heights of the Soul King that he was so determined to take the place of. After departing from the Soul Society, Aizen forms his Espada. He is very manipulative even with his own men. This is demonstrated in chapter 213 when Tozen brings the disobedient Grimmjow to him so that he can be disciplined for going to the human world without permission. Tozen demands that Grimmjow apologizes to Aizen for disrupting his peace, but Aizen states that he isn't angry at Grimmjow and considers his actions to be an overzealous display of loyalty. In the manga, we see Aizen glaring at Grimmjow, asking him if he is wrong to describe his actions as such. Grimmjow says that he isn't. Aizen knows that Tozen will not be satisfied by this alone. He lets this scrap between his men unfold before his eyes, knowing full well that Tozen will want to seek some form of justice for Grimmjow's actions. He indirectly allows for Grimmjow's arm to be severed, and then prevents Grimmjow from retaliating. It is entertaining to see Aizen behave as a villainous ruler, maintaining order amongst his group of arrogant and egotistical subordinates. After Grimmjow leaves, Gin is revealed to have been eavesdropping. He sarcastically remarks that he is cruel for playing with his men like that, confirming that he knew how Tozen would have reacted after what Aizen had said about Grimmjow's overzealous display of loyalty. This also acts as a foreshadowing to Aizen showing little to no care when his underlings are killed in fake Karakura town, and how he disrespects Haribel by attacking her when he begins to lose his patience and shows his true colors. Aizen is very intuitive and can predict how his opponents will react to his actions. This is demonstrated firsthand when he requests for Ukiura to kidnap Orihime, and has planned to use her as bait to lure the Gotai 13 to Hueco Mundo to separate their fighting power in order to launch a counterattack against them in fake Karakura Town. When Aizen arrives in Karakura Town, he is not the least bit affected by the Gotai 13 replacing the real Karakura Town with a replica. He is also not fazed by Head Captain Yamamoto sealing him, Gin, and Tozen with his ability Jogaku Enjo. He isn't worried as he expects his Espada to be able to defeat the Gotai 13 without their help. He calmly waited for his subordinates and planned to go to the Soul Society and create the Oken there. Aizen remains relaxed consistently when his plans are altered and unaccounted for obstacles appear before him. We see this when he doesn't expect Isshin to be fighting against White, when he didn't expect Shunsui and Ukitake to destroy the Senkaimon in the Soul Society arc, and even now not expecting Karakura Town to be replaced with a replica. One aspect of Aizen's story that I find intriguing is his relationship with Momo, and how Hitsugaya develops a hatred for Aizen because of how he betrays her trust in him. In chapter 334, she appears on the battlefield to confront Aizen after she was stabbed by him in chapter 169. In the Soul Society arc, Hitsugaya discovers that Aizen is still alive. After questioning him, he learns of his true nature. When he looks to the floor in chapter 170, he sees his childhood friend Momo bloodied and impaled, appearing to have been killed. Aizen apologizes to him for the way that he discovered her and suggests that he should have chopped up her body into pieces and hidden them instead. A sickening thought that he thinks about someone who he tricked into trusting him, the very person who respected him greatly. Hitsugaya understandably becomes overcome with his emotions, which is something that Aizen loves to do to others. He loves making them feel blinded by rage, and when they act based on emotion, he tactfully takes them down by remaining calm and composed. What a smug bastard, as he casually answers Hitsugaya's questions, revealing that he has been conspiring against the Soul Society from the very beginning since he became a captain. He dispatched Momo without any care as he didn't consider anyone but Gin to be his true lieutenant. Hitsugaya realizes that this whole time he was deceiving them all, to which Aizen smiles. We learn that Momo only joined the Gotai 13 because she desired to serve beside Aizen. She worked incredibly hard for this singular purpose. Aizen heartlessly responds by saying that this is exactly what made her so easy to manipulate. He purposefully requested for Momo to serve under his division. Hitsugaya is made to feel betrayal through Aizen turning his back on them, then learns about Momo's condition, and on top of that he sees no remorse in his enemy. Like a pressure cooker steadily building up heat, Hitsugaya erupts and attacks out of anger, wasting little time by activating his Bankai. He declares that he will kill Aizen himself, but the ever so smug Aizen smiles and advises he shouldn't make rash threats, as it reveals his weak nature. He takes advantage of Hitsugaya's overly emotional state and swiftly takes him down with ease, all the while smiling as he does so. Aizen quickly becomes a detestable character from the very beginning of his betrayal. So how does he react upon seeing Momo after so long? He is surprised to see her alive, as she looks at him nervously, yet holding her Zanbakuto determined to battle. Hitsugaya is concerned for her after seeing her appear on the battlefield. Momo states that she is not here as Captain Aizen's lieutenant, but rather as a Shinigami ready to battle against him. Rangiku notes how she referred to Aizen as Captain Aizen, and advises her to be careful. This reveals how deep-rooted Aizen's manipulation is, and how subtle Kubo is with his use of one word to demonstrate a character's emotional instability. This also validates Hitsugaya and Rangiku's concerns for her arrival on the battlefield. Later, Aizen tricks Hitsugaya into attacking Momo by using his Kyoka Suigetsu and switching places with her. He once again is overcome with anger and tries to attack Aizen, but it results in him and his comrades being cut down. He really is a master of manipulation, predicting the actions of his opponents through distressing them emotionally, so that they act without thinking, leaving themselves wide open for attack. Aizen knows precisely how to take advantage of the weak-minded nature of his former comrades. After disrespecting all of his prior comrades, Aizen displays the very same lack of empathy and manipulative behaviors towards his current subordinates. After Aizen sees Stark's defeat, he interrupts Haribel's battle by attacking her, stating that she is not strong enough to fight on his side. He treats his subordinates with such little respect and consideration, not caring for their deaths, and surprisingly even attacking and defeating one of them himself. He disrespects the Espada by telling Haribel that he alone is more powerful than all of them. This angers Haribel, who falls victim to Aizen's taunting. She charges at him but is swiftly taken down by Aizen. He knows that once his opponents have become emotionally affected by his words, he has already won the battle. When his former captain Hirako Shinji confronts Aizen, he shows disgust towards how he treats his underlings by not trusting in their abilities. We learn here that Aizen thinks that relying on others is a sign of weakness. Shinji is puzzled as to how he can say this when he gathered the Espada to serve under him. Surely he must have relied upon them and asked them to trust in him. However, Aizen reveals he never told them to trust in him. He simply invited them to come with him and advised them to not trust in anyone, including himself. Aizen states that you would have to be incredibly strong to only trust in yourself and your own ability. There are very few capable of such a feat. Aizen tells Shinji that ultimately people want to put their faith in something bigger and better than themselves. He states here that he will become a god and force everyone to believe in him. Looking back at all of Aizen's underlings throughout his history, his relationship with Gin Ichimaru is the most intriguing. It helps us to learn more about Aizen as a character through observing their interactions and analysing Gin's final act before he is defeated. Gin is able to see past Aizen's lies and his manipulations. He frighteningly is always around the corner listening in on his boss, and seems to know more about Aizen than anyone else in the series. He comments on how cruel Aizen is to toy with his underlings in the Hueco Mundo arc, or how he was enjoying watching Ichigo and his friends progress through Los Noches in chapter 255, and how he noticed Aizen was surprised to see Momo was still alive in chapter 334. These subtle observations seem to remind Aizen that he is being watched, and his every behaviour is being analysed. It would seem that Gin was doing this in order to learn everything he could about Aizen so that he could exploit a singular weakness to take him down. Aizen is about to draw his blade to kill Ichigo's friends, but Gin casually places his hand on his Zanbakudo, offering to go after them himself, but he surprises Aizen as Gin's Zanbakudo extends and impales him through the chest. Gin reveals that the only way to be free from Aizen's complete hypnosis is to touch his Zanbakudo Kyoka Suigetsu while it is in his unreleased state. Gin remained with him patiently for decades just to learn this information from him. When did Gin, his most loyal subordinate, decide to betray Aizen? In chapter 415, we see a flashback where Gin observes Aizen from afar as a child. As he watches him obtain the Hokyoku from 3 Shinigami, Gin notices that these 3 Shinigami who were reporting to Aizen were behind Rangiku's collapse when he first met her, as he remembers seeing them leaving the area where he found her. This flashback of Rangiku and Gin meeting is first shown to us in chapter 129, and in chapter 415 we understand that Aizen fed pieces of souls from hundreds of Shinigami and Rukongai citizens who had potential to the Hokyoku in an attempt to complete it, thus explaining why Gin found Rangiku collapsed when they first met. Gin declares that he will kill Aizen when he witnesses that he is the one who was ordering the 3 Shinigami to take pieces from the souls of Rukongai citizens, learning that it was Aizen who was responsible for Rangiku's weakened state. Gin as a child resolved to Rangiku that he would become a Shinigami and change things, so that she won't have to cry anymore. He pretended to be loyal to Aizen so that he could return to Rangiku that piece of a soul that was taken from her. Back in the present, Aizen, who is wounded, states that he expected Gin to betray him. Gin then reveals that he lied to Aizen, and his Zanbakudo's true ability is a poison that breaks down cells. He activates this ability and takes the Hokyoku from Aizen, and manages to get away. However, Aizen transforms into a new winged form and hunts down Gin, telling him that the Hokyoku has already accepted him as its owner, as it disappears from Gin's hand and back into Aizen's chest. Gin remained close to Aizen and was able to enjoy being in his company. Aizen is someone who wanted to become a god. Gin, due to revenge, desired to defeat this false god, but ultimately failed. Aizen attacks Gin and thanks him for reminding him of the feeling of fear, stating how this is necessary for evolution, as progress is made when you realize the fear of being killed at any moment. Thanks to Gin, he now has surpassed both Shinigami and Hollow, acquiring a form of existence far above them. This realization of fear contrasts with the end villain of the series, Uwatch, and I will later go into the differences between these two antagonists and how they both had differing ambitions and ideologies. Now, after covering Aizen's path to becoming a god, he has now arrived at the edge of reason and is confronted by Ichigo. His special research subject appears before him. Aizen is disappointed as he states that he doesn't feel any spiritual pressure from Ichigo. However, Gin, who is about to die, looks up at Ichigo and is reassured just by looking at Ichigo's eyes, saying that he appears to be stronger than before. He dies after feeling like he can leave the rest to Ichigo now. A man on the verge of death is able to see what Aizen is so oblivious to. This first act of arrogance foreshadows Aizen's downfall. Let's now look at the final battle between Ichigo and Aizen. When Ichigo first arrived in Fate Karakura town to challenge Aizen, he was very vulnerable to Aizen's taunting, but on this occasion, after having learnt the final Getsuga Tensho, now it is Aizen who is baffled by who stands before him. In chapter 417, Ichigo silences Aizen by forcibly escorting him away from a densely populated area so that they can fight without any casualties. Aizen, after evolving and becoming incredibly egotistical, is speechless when Ichigo manhandles him. He then proceeds to declare that he will end this battle quickly by defeating Aizen. Aizen soon understands that Ichigo has also evolved. However, his evolution is very different to his own. He admits that they both are at their peak evolutionary states. In chapter 418, Aizen states that he can destroy Ichigo's blade with a single blow. When he attacks, Ichigo stops his attack with his hand, which is a great callback to Aizen stopping Ichigo's attack with his finger during the Soul Society arc in chapter 174. Ichigo proves to have the upper hand, taunting Aizen, who then transforms into a new form, but his efforts are futile. Ichigo decides to end their battle with the final Getsuga Tensho. Aizen still cannot feel any spiritual pressure from Ichigo. He begins to think that Ichigo may have surpassed him, to which his ego has a difficult time to accept, as he states that it is impossible impossible. Ichigo uses his technique Mugetsu, which severely wounds Aizen, allowing Urahara to intervene to finally seal Aizen, resulting in his defeat. We have so far covered Aizen's rise and fall over the course of the series. Let's now further analyze Aizen's monologues, his desire to evolve and transcend, and ultimately how and why he tried to become a god and failed. Bleach is riddled with references to religion and philosophy. Aizen's character is expanded upon further when we begin to explore these references and their meanings. Let's begin with the very device which propelled his ambitions and allowed him to manifest his heart's desire. The whole concept of the Hokyoku is really underappreciated. For the most part, it is perceived to be essential to the immediate plot and motivation of the characters, but considered in the grand scale of the story to be insignificant. Comparisons of the Hokyoku to what screenwriters would call a MacGuffin are common. I don't think that the Hokyoku is an unexplored tool, made just to drive the plot of Bleach. The core principles behind it stem from the Hindu and Buddhist interpretations of the Philosopher's Stone, called the Chintamani Jewel. Similar to the Hokyoku, the Chintamani Jewel has an ability to fulfill wishes. At some point in the story, both Aizen and Urahara realize the origin of their reality and the truth behind the Soul King. The truth behind the current state of existence in Bleach is explained by the original sin, which is revealed to us in the Can't For Your Own World novels published after the serialization of Bleach. The original sin is an event from the past which changed and shaped the world, but because of its morally questionable nature, any mention of it is purposefully erased from history. The fall of Aizen, Ginjo's grudge against the Soul Society, and the 1000-year Quincy Blood War, these conflicts are linked to the original sin. For the purposes of this video, we need to know that in the beginning the world was complete, and death didn't exist. Then the Shinigami separated the world into different realms: Hueco Mundo, Soul Society, the Dangai, and the human world. The god of the previous reality had his powers and body parts separated via a special ritual. He was then sealed forever inside a crystal prison, and was now referred to as the Soul King, a lifeless corpse who hasn't exactly died but isn't alive either. The new realms that the Shinigami created were unstable, so they placed the Soul King as the linchpin to maintain the balance of the world. Before death existed, there was eternal existence, but the Shinigami introduced the concept of death through the changes that they made to reality. The consequences of the original sin include Shinigami ruling the order of the world, and the existence of Hollows. Since the very beginning of Bleach, the main conflict has always been between Shinigami and Hollows, a self-inflicted feud caused by the Shinigami's original sin. They introduced death to reality and thus led to the creation of Hollows. In Abrahamic religions, the original sin is described as man being banished from the Garden of Eden. Comparatively, the Shinigami's original sin was to create the current fake world and turn God into a lifeless corpse. But why would they do this? This is answered by the Buddhist belief that without suffering you cannot make progress and evolve. The Shinigami desired to create an imperfect world, believing that too much happiness will lead to ignorance and will prevent enlightenment, which a Buddhist believes is the only way to attain nirvana and escape the cycle of reincarnation. The approach of the Shinigami is devoid of God, similar to Buddhism, whereas the original state of reality had a god and was overseeing a perfect world, alike to the Abrahamic interpretation of reality prior to the banishment from the Garden of Eden. Bleach Volume 48 is titled God is Dead. This is in reference to the truth behind the Soul King, and thus introduces us to the conflicting philosophies behind Urahara and Aizen's worldview after they learnt the truth about their reality. The Greek philosopher Plato believed that the world of the living didn't matter as it was not eternal. He accepted that reality was imperfect due to the concept of death. However, he states that the pursuit of true wisdom and knowledge was the everlasting world of the gods. He elaborates upon this by stating that it is philosophers who stand above men to gaze into the world of wisdom and to return with knowledge which will improve the human world. Both Aizen and Urahara can be likened to the fundamentals of Plato's philosophers in terms of the desire to comprehend beyond their sense of perception. We live in a world of visible and intelligible things. Our five senses form our visible world, thus it is subject to change and uncertainty. However, the intelligible world is made up of unchanging rules of reason, like mathematics and abstract definitions. Thus, the intelligible world will always describe the eternal form of things. For example, a human will always take up the form which applies to all humans. Despite the variations of skin color, sizes, and gender, the physical form has an abstract definition. The human form will always be what it is. Now, the individual human like yourself is, however, a physical object, which is subject to the uncertainty of the visible world. If a human is dropped from a skyscraper, then it ceases to fit that intelligible eternal human form. Plato imagines mentions that the visible and intelligible world are divided in the middle. The lower half consists of the visible world, and the upper half is the intelligible world. He states that each half represents a type of knowledge, the visible world representing opinion, and the intelligible world representing true knowledge and the word of God. The big reveal within Bleach is that the world of God, Plato's intelligible world, has been altered and changed because of the original sin orchestrated by the Shinigami. The catalyst that causes Urahara and Aizen to take action is learning that the intelligible eternal form of God and the nature of reality is riddled with uncertainty and subject to change. Both of them, realizing the truth of the world, consequently undertook differing philosophies to deal with the truths presented to them. Urahara accepts the way that the world has come to be and adopts the approach of the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Like the title of Bleach Volume 48, God is dead, the Soul King is a corpse not in control. He exists merely to maintain the balance of the worlds. Through learning that the Shinigami killed God, it grants us freedom from subservience. But Urahara also comes to accept we must now undergo struggle to make progress. Nietzsche stated God is dead upon the advent of scientific knowledge. In defiance to Christian beliefs, he states that humans killed God through finding meaning and understanding of reality from science as opposed to religion. Through our own hand we killed the murderer of all murderers, an approach which some consider to be nihilistic, but objectively offers a realistic outlook on reality, which puts the power into the hands of individuals instead of an all-powerful deity. Aizen, however, refuses to accept things just as they are. Falling in line with Plato's views, he desires to attain greatness and become God himself, to return intelligibility to the world. Like a true philosopher of Plato, he desires to go to the world of the gods so that he may return with wisdom and knowledge, which will serve to benefit humanity through progression and enlightenment. They both have their own reasons for creating the Hokyoku, which stems from these very philosophies that I have just gone over. Initially introduced as a device that blurs the boundaries between Shinigami and Hollow, it is then revealed to fulfill the desire of the possessor's heart. Aizen's actions were driven by his desire to overthrow the fabricated, hypocritical system which is in place, considering the Shinigami to be a mindless herd who blindly serve their Soul King. Aizen's drive can once again be explained by Nietzsche, who allows us to further analyze the polarity between Urahara and Aizen's differing ideologies. Nietzsche introduces to us a hypothetical concept called the Ubermensch, which literally means the overman. This concept represents the ultimate goal that everyone should aspire towards, only attained by rejecting the status quo, desiring to be more than just a member of the herd, free from the constructs of society and its morals. The overman quite literally believes in no higher power and fills that void with ambition, innovation, and desire for true understanding of the world. This individual believes that there are no limits to their own possibility. Consequently, they aspire to take down the current flawed system and replace it with a superior system of their own. Aizen is this overman, which explains the lengths that he goes to in order to bring about the systematic collapse of the Shinigami. He proclaims before he leaves the Soul Society that nobody has ever stood atop the heavens before, not even the gods. This once again draws parallels to Nietzsche's famous concept of God is dead, as Aizen states neither them, being the Shinigami herd, or himself have ever attained the heights to which he seeks, but he will be the one to do so. His actions solidify his intense desire for this purpose, through his manipulation, betrayal, and lack of concern for disrupting the status quo. The desire to overcome that the overman possesses is defined by Nietzsche as the will to power. Aizen's will to power is the Hokyoku, which allows him to become more than just a Shinigami. He transcends into a being superior to Shinigami and Hollows after he places the Hokyoku within himself. This wish-granting orb and Aizen's will are synced, due to the very nature of the Hokyoku fulfilling the heart's desire. Similar to the overman concept, Nietzsche also mentions the idea of the last man. Like the overman, the last man is aware of the nature of the world and its flaws, but cannot bring themselves to change the way of the world, choosing acceptance rather than the more arduous task of altering and improving the world. The last man is represented by Urahara. Aizen and Urahara are very similar in terms of intellect, talent, and knowledge of the world. The difference between the two of them is focused upon in chapter 421, as Urahara justifies the existence of the world and the Soul King. Aizen is baffled as to how someone who is as intellectual as Urahara can accept being ruled by that thing. Urahara states that without the Soul King the worlds will crumble, simply stating this is the way the world works. This is what infuriates Aizen, as he insults Urahara and his final words echo his overman philosophy. The victor should speak of the way the world should be, not the way it is. Urahara seals Aizen, but Aizen is so blinded by his delusions of grandeur and his superiority complex, he fails to notice that he has weakened. The seal takes effect as Urahara explains that the Hokyoku no longer recognizes Aizen as its master. When Dangai Ichigo and Aizen begin to battle, they both have attained Transcendence. Aizen has 4 forms. He goes into a cocoon form, then emerges from his cocoon into his second form. His third form he grows wings, and in his final form he resembles a literal monster. The chapters which include the final confrontation with Aizen are named after the title Deicide, which means killing of a god. This term is derived from the Latin term decidium, which is made up from deus, god, and cidium, killing. The naming of these chapters foreshadows Aizen's downfall. We also get to experience the differences between Ichigo and Aizen's transcendent forms. Aizen believes that you transcend the norm by breaking the limitations of a Shinigami and a Hollow, thus becoming a mixture of both of the species. This explains his obsession with hollowification experiments. A transcendent being possesses spiritual pressure which exceeds the norm. Ichigo indeed possesses this, and it confuses Aizen as he cannot feel his spiritual energy. He wrongly assumes that Ichigo exchanged a spiritual power to elevate his physical power in chapter 418. Ichigo indeed has power that is greater than the transcended Aizen, who cannot stop gloating about his superior evolved state. During their battle, Aizen is in his third form, which has a closed eye placed on his forehead. I believe this represents the opposite of the spiritual third eye, which is open through enlightenment, as it is a spiritual internal eye, not a physical eye you can outwardly see on the face. The third eye is an esoteric concept, which is referenced in several religions, and is referred to as the invisible mind's eye. The difference with this third eye is that it is inverted, it is visible on his forehead, and is awakened by rage, as Aizen, infuriated by Ichigo's claims of him being stronger than him, causes him to transform into his final form, which appears to be an outward manifestation of the monster he has internally allowed himself to become, as a result of his hubris. Aizen attained transcendence via the Hokyoku, as opposed to Ichigo, who is a hybrid being who literally attained power that was beyond that of a Shinigami, Hollow, and even a Quincy. A natural evolution made through Ichigo's willingness to sacrifice, contrasted against Aizen's forced evolution he attains, thanks to the will of power generated by the Hokyoku. In Buddhism, transcendence is attained through absence of suffering. Only then can the state of nirvana be achieved. It is Ichigo's powers which thrust him into the front lines of battle, which cause him to feel suffering. He chooses to relinquish his powers via learning the final Getsuga Tensho. He attains nirvana, but like in the Buddhist interpretation of transcendence, this is temporary and only reserved for mortal beings. Ichigo returns from his evolved state after he uses the technique Mugetsu, and Aizen is forced to relinquish his godly form once his loneliness overcomes his heart. Aizen became a false god who was consumed by his false sense of enlightenment. He was defeated by the self-aware Ichigo and banished to the lowest level called Muken of the Soul Society's underground prison. It is ironic that he desired to stand on top of heaven, reaching heights that not even gods could fathom, but instead he is banished, like Lucifer, to the lowest realm of reality. After Aizen's defeat in chapter 422, Ichigo questions Urahara. He wonders if the Hokyoku rejected Aizen, describing it to be a device that reads the hearts of those around it and makes their wishes come true. Did Aizen ultimately desire to lose his powers? Ichigo states that he could feel Aizen's blade in battle once he became strong enough to challenge him as an equal. Ichigo states that he felt loneliness emanating from Aizen's Zanpakuto. He theorizes if indeed he was born with exceptional power, he may have just seeked for someone who could see things from his perspective, someone who shared his worldview. During his battle with Ichigo, he eventually gave up looking for someone who shared his perspective, and in the end just desired to become an ordinary Shinigami, ultimately coming to terms with the world and his own feelings of loneliness. This is what causes Ichigo to feel remorse towards Aizen. As his eyes are drawn with sadness, Urahara notices this and reassures him that he did the right thing by defeating Aizen. Through his battle with Ichigo, Aizen is deeply affected to the extent that his heart desires for normality, causing rejection from the Hokyoku, which is his will to power, and thus reverting his godlike form. Aizen retained his immortality, but no longer held the form of a transcended being. The idea of Aizen being lonely is touched upon by Kubo in Bleach Databook 3. He describes him to be very ambitious, someone who never gives up, overcoming his loneliness due to his goal preoccupying his mind, preventing him from thinking about how lonely he actually is. Now that he has become this evolved being, and is at the cusp of achieving his desire to overthrow the Soul King, he realizes how lonely it must be to stand at the top with nobody beside him. None of his subordinates survived, and he has nobody to call upon as an equal. Possibly Urahara, but his acceptance of the status quo is in direct conflict with Aizen, thus causing him to be alone in his pursuit. This is why he may have wished to be a normal Shinigami in the end, like Ichigo mentions in chapter 422, thus causing the Hokyoku to reject him. I mentioned this earlier. While Aizen was speaking to Shinji, he states that he believes people place their faith in someone or something which is more powerful than they are, leading them to become dependent upon blindly following that thing. The recipient of that faith seeks to follow someone who is above their own position, so that they can place their faith in them in order to escape the pressure of being blindly followed. The recipient of that faith too seeks out out someone who is more powerful in order to put their faith in. He believes that this hierarchy of faith and power explains the way in which all kings are born and how all gods are born. Aizen describes here the herd who accept reality without questioning it, living within the limited scope of reason. In volume 48, the poem at the beginning states, "People are all imitations of monkeys, gods are all imitations of humans." This ties into Aizen's speech to Shinji, as the poem expresses his frustrations with the importance the Shinigami give to superior beings who are unworthy of it. When Aizen leaves the Dangai to arrive in the real Karakura town, he states that reason exists solely for those who must cling to it for survival. Now let us go to the edge of all reason. The edge of reason is the limits of existence, to push oneself beyond what is thought to be possible in the pursuit of progression, to become a superior being worthy of the position. Aizen's The Edge of Reason quote is a great elaboration to the poem that Kubo writes at the beginning of volume 12, which is titled The Flower on the Precipice. We think that the flower on the precipice is beautiful because our fear makes our feet stop at its edge, instead of stepping forward into the sky like that flower. This poem comments on the fearlessness to exist in a place where no other can reach to challenge you. Their fears associated with the cliff edge and stepping out into thin air cause them to admire the beauty of the fearless flower from afar. To those who have the courage to step forth and overcome their fears, only they get to see what lies beyond the precipice. Of course, for Aizen, his desire to stand on top of heaven, to occupy the vacant throne in the sky, is his interpretation of fearlessly stepping over the edge of the precipice. Even after his defeat and imprisonment, Aizen still desires to not have anyone rule over him, remaining true to his view of the way the world should be. Kubo gives Aizen the honor of delivering the final speech on courage. Aizen, like Yuwatch, desired to change the norms of society. However, they had differing reasons. Yuwatch desired to rid the concept of death from reality, thus stopping the primal fear that we relate to our mortality. When Aizen is betrayed by Gin, he thanks him for reminding him of the feeling of fear, stating that without fear there can be no evolution or progress. Now that he has become immortal, he has in some way lost that fear of dying. Only he could comment on Yuwatch's desire to rid the world of death, as his immortality has allowed him to consider the consequences of forming a world without this fear. Aizen thanks Gin for reminding him of the fear of being killed at any moment, and so based on these words you can assume that without the fear of dying there is no progress, relating back to the Buddhist belief that without suffering you cannot be free from it, and thus make progress. To accept that suffering exists in life is the first of the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. Suffering includes the fear we have due to realizations of our own mortality. Aizen's speech in chapter 686 answers why it is necessary for the fear of death to exist. He states that in a world without the fear of death, people would not search for hope. They will merely exist without purpose. The very act of existing while fending off fears is a different and more admirable feat according to Aizen. He reveals to us that living in such a manner is the very essence of courageousness. This final rendition of Aizen's character, who speaks after his defeat, demonstrates to us a character who still holds his views on the way the world should be, but has accepted that he could not achieve his desires. Thus, with his failure combined with his desire for progression, he is able to show us his growth through his final speech about courage, describing in effect the most admirable aspect of the world he wished to alter. The Four Noble Truths of Buddhism really help to bring more insight into the flaws of Yuwatch's ideology. Like I said, the first noble truth is to accept that suffering in life is inevitable. During our lifetime we will feel pain through loss, sickness, injury, tiredness, and the ultimate suffering, which is to die. To accept the first noble truth, you realize that whatever happiness you try to strive towards, it will not last. All moments in life come and pass, so too will we. The second noble truth is to understand that our suffering arises from our attachment to our desires. For Yuwatch, his suffering, which is his fear of death, arises from his attachment to life and existence. The third noble truth speaks of the end to suffering, which will result in ultimate freedom, the state of nirvana, which translates to freedom from suffering, worries, and pain. This state cannot be comprehended by those who have not attained it. The third noble truth speaks of achieving the heightened state of nirvana, which explains Aizen's thoughts on progression, and how he related the fear of dying at any moment to his own progression. When he is reminded of his mortality he was made to suffer, this ceases once he rids himself from his attachment to life and reaches a heightened state of being through evolving after Gin's betrayal. Suffering stops once we rid ourselves to the attachment to our desires. Our selfish cravings lead to our ultimate demise, which is exactly what happened to Yuwatch. Aizen merely comments on the necessity of death in relation to making progress and living fearlessly in his final speech on courage. Aizen's character undergoes change from his first appearance in the story to his last. This is pretty evident if you have been following the video up until now. In a typical positive change arc, a character believes in a lie. They then encounter the truth, and it is this truth that helps the character to overcome the lie that they believe by finding and accepting the truth. Aizen's change in the story flips this positive change arc on its head, as he undergoes what is known in screenwriting as a negative change character arc. In her book Creating Character Arcs, K.M. Weiland states that a negative change arc tells a story of a character who ends in a worse place than that in which he started. The negative change arc has 3 types of arcs within it: the Disillusionment Arc, the Fall Arc, and the Corruption Arc. I believe that Aizen undergoes 2 of these negative arcs, one in the past and one in the present timeline of Bleach. The Disillusionment Arc occurs for Aizen when he learns the truth about reality, the real purpose of the Soul King. This entire truth he learns is a negative one. Due to not knowing much about Aizen's past, it is difficult to pinpoint what other than his innate talent and pursuit of knowledge led him to learn about the truth of the Soul King. We don't know the initial lie that Aizen tells himself that leads him to the truth, which causes his disillusionment. We can infer that some form of dissatisfaction with the world caused him to desire to understand the world, which led to him learning the truth of the world. In the story, the earliest point that we see Aizen is after he has learnt the truth and begins his holification experiments. We observe his negative change arc unfold from this point onwards. In the present day, Aizen undergoes the Fall Arc. After his disillusionment occurs, it results in Aizen developing his fatal flaw or lie. His lie, he believes, is that he is the only one worthy to rule over others, not allowing himself to be ruled by anyone else, especially the Soul King, who he depersonalizes by referring to him as it or that thing. Instead of overcoming this lie through finding acceptance or another truth to resolve his concerns, Aizen instead falls further into this lie, ultimately resulting in his defeat and imprisonment. Aizen rejects the truth of the world. Unlike Urahara, he cannot accept it. Like the overman that he is, Aizen seeks to change the world into how it should be. Unlike the herd, he cannot blindly place his faith in a god that is given power by the people who solely rely upon reason for existence. He realizes the Soul King is a powerless linchpin. His hubris and superiority complex makes him believe that he himself is worthy of becoming a heightened being, deserving of others' faith. Aizen clings to his lie and warped belief of how the world should be to such an extent that it causes him to manipulate and betray anyone who ever made the mistake of trusting him. This ultimately leads to Aizen falling from his well-respected position as a captain and ultimately falling far from his desire to sit at the top. He is now bound to a chair, powerless and sealed deep underground, where his immortality will cause him to lament over his failings for eternity. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, then please consider supporting my channel on Patreon. I have multiple tiers with rewards including access to an exclusive Discord server, video scripts, as well as being the first to know about unreleased upcoming videos. Thank you for your time, and whatever you choose to contribute I will appreciate, and it will mean a lot to me.